Good evening, everyone, and welcome to The Droning Professor. Tonight we're going to learn about the physics of time travel. So, as you make yourselves comfortable, please take a moment to let us know where you're listening from, and feel free to subscribe. Now, as always, take a moment for some deep breaths, letting your mind and body relax for a good night of sleep. Before we begin today's lecture on the physics of time travel, I should probably warn you that by the end of this discussion, you might find yourself questioning whether you actually attended yesterday's class, or if you're still planning to attend it tomorrow. Don't worry, that's perfectly normal when dealing with the strange world of temporal mechanics. Time is perhaps the most fundamental yet mysterious aspect of our universe. We experience it flowing from past to future in an unrelenting stream, yet physics tells us a very different story. Today, we'll explore what modern physics has revealed about the nature of time and whether the science fiction dream of time travel might actually be grounded in scientific reality. Now, I know some of you are probably thinking, "Professor, I can barely get to your 8 a.m. class on time. How am I supposed to understand time travel?" Well, stick with me, because as we'll see, being late to class and time travel have more in common than you might think. The question of time travel has captivated human imagination for centuries, from H.G. Wells's The Time Machine to Back to the Future and Doctor Who. But what does real physics tell us about the possibility of moving through time? Can we actually build a time machine? And if we could, what would happen if you went back and accidentally prevented your parents from meeting? These aren't just idle philosophical questions anymore. Thanks to Albert Einstein's revolutionary theories of relativity, we now know that time travel isn't just possible. It's happening all around us, all the time. The catch: most of it is so subtle that you'd never notice it without extremely precise instruments. Before Einstein came along and turned everything upside down, scientists held what we now call the classical or Newtonian view of time. According to Sir Isaac Newton, time was absolute and universal, a cosmic clock ticking away at the same rate throughout the universe. In Newton's world, if you synchronized your watch with someone on Mars, those watches would stay synchronized forever, regardless of how either of you moved through space. This view seemed perfectly reasonable. After all, our everyday experience suggests that time flows uniformly. An hour is an hour, whether you're sitting in a lecture hall or traveling in a car. Newton's equations of motion treated time as a parameter that marched forward at a constant rate, independent of the observer's motion or location. Think of it like a movie where time is the film projector, running at a constant 24 frames per second, and all the actors in the universe are performing in perfect synchronization. Simple, elegant, and as we now know, completely wrong. The Newtonian view served physics well for over 2 centuries. It explained the motion of planets, the behavior of pendulums, and the trajectories of cannonballs with remarkable precision. But by the late 1900s, cracks were beginning to appear in this clockwork universe, particularly when physicists tried to understand the behavior of light. Albert Einstein, a patent clerk turned physicist, changed everything with his special theory of relativity in 1905, followed by general relativity in 1915. These theories didn't just modify our understanding of time, they completely revolutionized it. Einstein's key insight was that space and time aren't separate entities, but are woven together into a single fabric called space-time. Moreover, this fabric isn't rigid like Newton imagined, but flexible. It can be stretched, compressed, and warped by matter and energy. Imagine space-time as a giant rubber sheet. In Newton's world, this sheet would be perfectly flat and rigid. Einstein showed us that massive objects create dips and curves in this sheet, like bowling balls placed on a trampoline. These curves are what we experience as gravity, and they also affect the flow of time itself. The implications are profound. Time isn't universal, it's relative. How fast time passes depends on how fast you're moving, and how strong the gravitational field is around you. This leads us to our first type of time travel: time dilation. Time dilation comes in 2 flavors, both discovered by Einstein. The first is velocity time dilation, which occurs when objects move at high speeds relative to each other. The second is gravitational time dilation, which occurs in strong gravitational fields. According to special relativity, as you approach the speed of light, time slows down relative to a stationary observer. This isn't just theoretical. It's been confirmed countless times in experiments with high-speed particles and atomic clocks. The mathematical relationship is given by the Lorentz factor. Gamma equals 1 divided by the square root of 1 minus v squared divided by c squared, where v is your velocity and c is the speed of light. When you're moving slowly compared to light speed, gamma is approximately 1 and time dilation is negligible. But as you approach the speed of light, gamma approaches infinity and time dilation becomes extreme. Let's say you decide to skip the rest of the semester and take a trip to Proxima Centauri, our nearest stellar neighbor, about 4.2 light-years away. If you could travel at 99% the speed of light, the journey would take about 4.3 years, as measured by those of us back on Earth. But for you, due to time dilation, the journey would feel like only about 8 months. You'd return to find that all your classmates have graduated, gotten jobs, and probably forgotten about that group project you left unfinished. This type of time travel only works in one direction, forward. You can slow down your personal clock relative to the rest of the universe, effectively traveling into the future, but you can't reverse the process to travel backward. Einstein's general theory of relativity revealed another form of time dilation. The stronger the gravitational field, the slower time moves. This effect, while usually small, has practical implications for our daily lives. The GPS satellites orbiting Earth provide a perfect example. These satellites orbit at an altitude where Earth's gravitational field is weaker than at the surface. As a result, time moves slightly faster for the satellites than for us on Earth, about 38 microseconds per day faster. Without correcting for this effect, GPS would accumulate errors of several miles per day. So the next time your GPS tells you to turn left in 500 feet when you're clearly supposed to turn right, don't blame time dilation. That's just regular old technology being finicky. The effect becomes more dramatic near massive objects. Near a black hole, for instance, time dilation can be extreme. If you were to orbit close to a black hole's event horizon and then return to Earth, you might find that centuries have passed on Earth while only hours passed for you. This scenario was famously depicted in the movie Interstellar, where the protagonists visit a planet near a massive black hole. 1 hour on the planet equals 7 years on Earth. While the specific numbers in the movie are somewhat exaggerated for dramatic effect, the underlying physics is sound. One of the most famous illustrations of time dilation is the twin paradox, first proposed by Einstein himself. Imagine identical twins, Alice and Bob. Alice stays on Earth while Bob travels to a distant star at near light speed and then returns. When Bob returns to Earth, he finds that Alice has aged much more than he has. If Bob traveled at 99.5% the speed of light to a star 10 light-years away and back, about 20 years would have passed on Earth, but Bob would have aged only about 2 years. This raises an uncomfortable question for family reunions. How do you explain to your twin sister why she's now old enough to be your mother? Sorry, Alice, but I spent my 20s traveling at relativistic speeds. Probably won't get you out of trouble for missing 2 decades of birthdays. The key insight is that the situation isn't symmetric. While both twins see the other's clock running slow during the journey, Bob experiences acceleration and deceleration when he turns around to come home. This breaks the symmetry and resolves the apparent paradox. The twin paradox isn't just a thought experiment. Similar effects have been observed with atomic clocks flown on airplanes and with particles in accelerators. Time dilation is real, measurable, and happens every day. While time dilation allows for forward time travel, backward time travel requires more exotic solutions to Einstein's equations. Enter wormholes, hypothetical tunnels through space-time that could, in principle, connect different regions of space and time. A wormhole, also called an Einstein-Rosen bridge, is a solution to the field equations of general relativity. Picture space-time as a flat sheet of paper. Instead of traveling across the surface from point A to point B, a wormhole would be like folding the paper so that A and B touch, then poking a hole through both points to create a shortcut. Think of it as the universe's ultimate subway system. Instead of taking the local train that stops at every star system, you hop on the express that cuts right through the fabric of space-time itself. The only problem is that, unlike the subway, we're not sure if wormhole tickets are actually for sale. The mathematics of wormholes are well established, but their physical existence is highly speculative. Even if they do exist, they face several fundamental problems. Most wormhole solutions are inherently unstable. Without some form of exotic matter with negative energy density to prop them open, wormholes would collapse faster than light could travel through them. This exotic matter would need properties unlike any known form of matter or energy. If wormholes could be used for time travel, they could potentially create closed time like curves, paths through space-time that loop back to their own past. This leads to all sorts of paradoxes, which we'll discuss in detail shortly. Even if stable wormholes could exist, we have no idea how to create one. The energy requirements would likely be astronomical, possibly requiring the manipulation of matter and energy on galactic scales. Despite these challenges, wormholes remain an active area of theoretical research. Some physicists have proposed that quantum effects might stabilize microscopic wormholes, while others investigate whether advanced civilizations might be able to create and maintain macroscopic wormholes. In general relativity, a closed time-like curve, or CTC, is a world line in space-time that returns to its starting point in space and time. In simpler terms, it's a path that leads back to your own past, the mathematical description of a time loop. Several solutions to Einstein's field equations permit CTCs, including several famous scenarios. In 1949, mathematician Kurt Gödel, famous for his incompleteness theorems, found an exact solution to Einstein's equations that describes a rotating universe filled with dust and a cosmological constant. In this universe, it's possible to travel into your own past by following a sufficiently long path through space-time. Gödel's solution was particularly troubling to Einstein, who reportedly said that he wasn't sure if he should be more disturbed by the existence of closed time-like curves, or by the fact that his own equations permitted them. It's like discovering that the instruction manual you wrote accidentally includes directions for building a time machine. Fortunately for causality, our universe doesn't appear to be rotating in the way Gödel's solution requires, so we don't live in a Gödel universe. Proposed by physicist Miguel Alcubierre in 1994, the Alcubierre drive isn't exactly a closed time-like curve, but it demonstrates how space-time manipulation might allow faster-than-light travel, which could theoretically be used for time travel. The Alcubierre drive works by contracting space in front of a spacecraft and expanding space behind it, allowing the ship to effectively travel faster than light without locally exceeding the speed of light. The ship itself remains in a flat region of space-time where normal physics applies. It's like moving a piece of paper by sliding it along a table rather than picking it up and carrying it. The paper doesn't move relative to the table surface, but the table surface itself moves relative to the room. While mathematically consistent, the Alcubierre drive requires exotic matter with negative energy density, similar to the wormhole stability problem. Frank Tipler showed that an infinitely long, rotating cylinder of matter could create closed time-like curves in its vicinity. Unfortunately, infinitely long is a bit of a deal-breaker from an engineering perspective. When your time machine requires infinite amounts of matter and infinite construction time, you know you're probably not getting funding from the National Science Foundation. The most famous time travel paradox is the grandfather paradox. You travel back in time and prevent your grandfather from meeting your grandmother, thus preventing your own birth. But if you were never born, who traveled back in time to prevent your grandfather from meeting your grandmother? This paradox illustrates the logical problems that arise from backward time travel. But the grandfather paradox is just one member of a large family of temporal paradoxes. Also known as a causal loop, this occurs when information or objects exist without any discernible origin. For example, imagine you travel back in time and give Shakespeare a copy of Hamlet, which he then writes and publishes. Who actually wrote Hamlet? This paradox is particularly troubling for English professors, who have spent careers analyzing the deeper meaning in Shakespeare's works, only to discover that he might have gotten his ideas from a time traveler with a copy of Shakespeare, the complete works. Related to the bootstrap paradox, this concerns the creation and destruction of information in time loops. If information can be passed to the past without any original source, it violates our understanding of how information behaves in physics. If you travel to the past, do you have free will to change events, or are you destined to act in a way that preserves the timeline? This paradox touches on deep philosophical questions about determinism and causality. Physicists have proposed several solutions to these paradoxes, each with its own implications and problems. Named after physicist Igor Novikov, the Novikov self-consistency principle suggests that the laws of physics somehow conspire to prevent paradoxes. Any actions you take in the past were already part of history. You can't change the past because your time travel was always part of the past. Under this principle, if you try to prevent your grandparents from meeting, something will always go wrong. Your gun will jam, you'll get the wrong address, or you'll discover that the person you thought was your grandfather actually isn't. It's like the universe has a very persistent fact-checker that won't let you submit any historical revisions. Every time you try to change something, reality marks it up with red ink and hands it back with a note saying, "Please see me after the timeline." This quantum mechanical interpretation suggests that every possible outcome of every event occurs in parallel universes. When you travel back in time and change something, you don't alter your original timeline, you create a new branch of the multiverse. In this scenario, preventing your grandparents from meeting doesn't create a paradox because you came from a different timeline where they did meet. You simply create a new timeline where they don't meet, and you're never born. This solution effectively turns every time traveler into an interdimensional immigrant. You can visit the past, but you can never truly go home again, at least not to the same home you left. Some physicists propose that quantum effects might prevent the formation of closed time, like curves, altogether. As you try to create a time machine, quantum fluctuations become increasingly violent, ultimately destroying the machine before it can function. This is similar to the cosmic censorship hypothesis, which suggests that the universe prevents the formation of naked singularities, or black holes without event horizons, that would expose the breakdown of general relativity to outside observers. While we don't have flux capacitors or a TARDIS, several real-world phenomena and technologies demonstrate time-like effects. High-energy particle accelerators routinely create particles that experience significant time dilation. Muons, for example, have very short lifetimes, but when accelerated to near light speeds, they live much longer from our perspective, allowing them to reach detectors that would be impossible to reach otherwise. As mentioned earlier, GPS satellites are essentially a constellation of time machines, experiencing time at a slightly different rate than we do on Earth's surface. The famous Hoffeli-Keating experiment in 1971 flew atomic clocks around the world on commercial airliners and measured the predicted time differences due to both velocity and gravitational time dilation. You experience gravitational time dilation every day, though the effect is incredibly small. Time moves slightly faster for your head than for your feet, because your head is farther from Earth's center and experiences slightly weaker gravity. This means that, technically, your head is constantly traveling into the future relative to your feet. However, the effect is so small that over a human lifetime, it amounts to less than a nanosecond, hardly enough to affect your schedule. Modern physics continues to explore the theoretical possibilities of time travel, though most work focuses on understanding the fundamental nature of time rather than building practical time machines. Recent research has explored how quantum mechanics might affect time travel. Some studies suggest that quantum effects could actually make time travel more consistent by naturally preventing paradoxes. The quantum Zeno effect shows that frequent measurements can freeze a quantum system in its current state. Some researchers speculate that similar effects might prevent paradoxes in quantum time machines. This approach to quantum gravity suggests that space-time has a discrete structure at the smallest scales. This discreteness might prevent the formation of closed time like curves or change their behavior in fundamental ways. String theory, our leading candidate for a theory of quantum gravity, has complex relationships with time travel. Some string theory scenarios permit time travel, while others prohibit it through subtle quantum effects. While we can't build macroscopic time machines, physicists continue to search for microscopic evidence of time travel-like effects. Some experiments have claimed to observe particles arriving before they were sent, though these results remain highly controversial and likely have conventional explanations. Even if the physics of time travel could be worked out, practical time machines would face numerous engineering challenges. Most theoretical time machines require enormous amounts of energy. Creating a traversable wormhole might require energy equivalent to the mass of a star. The Alcubierre drive requires exotic matter with negative energy density, something we don't know how to create. To put this in perspective, the energy needed for some proposed time machines is more than humanity has produced in its entire history. It's like trying to power a city with a single AA battery. Technically, both involve electricity, but the scale is just slightly off. Many time machine designs require materials with properties unlike anything we know how to make. Exotic matter with negative energy density, materials with tensile strength greater than nuclear forces, or perfect superfluids that exist at room temperature. These are the kinds of materials that theoretical time machines need. Even if you could build a time machine, how would you control where and when you go? Time travel navigation might be like trying to hit a specific second in history from billions of years away. The precision required would be extraordinary. Time travel might have serious biological consequences. Rapid acceleration to near-light speeds would create enormous g-forces. Passage through exotic space-time geometries might expose travelers to lethal radiation or gravitational forces. There's also the question of what happens to your atoms during time travel. Do they remain connected to your consciousness, or do you arrive in the past as a scattered cloud of elementary particles with a very confused expression? Popular culture has given us many different models of time travel, from the fixed timeline of 12 Monkeys to the branching timelines of Back to the Future. How do these compare to what physics actually tells us? In movies like 12 Monkeys and Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, the timeline is fixed. Time travelers were always part of history, and their actions in the past were already accounted for. This is closest to the Novikov self-consistency principle. Back to the Future popularized the idea that changes to the past create changes in the future, potentially erasing the time traveler from existence. This model creates paradoxes that physics has difficulty resolving. Movies like X-Men, Days of Future Past, suggest that changing the past creates alternate timelines. This is similar to the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics. Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure actually presents one of the most sophisticated models of time travel, where the characters use information from their future selves to solve problems in the present. This creates causal loops but avoids paradoxes through careful self-consistency. It's somewhat ironic that a comedy about two slackers trying to pass a history test contains more sophisticated temporal mechanics than most serious science fiction films. Time travel raises profound philosophical questions that go beyond physics. If effect can precede cause in a time loop, what does causation actually mean? Our understanding of cause and effect is fundamental to how we understand reality, but time travel challenges these basic concepts. If you meet your past self, are you the same person? If you change the past and create a new timeline, which version of you is the real one? These questions touch on deep issues of personal identity and consciousness. Time travel paradoxes often hinge on questions of free will. If you have free will, you should be able to change the past, creating paradoxes. If you don't have free will, the paradoxes disappear, but so does human agency. What is time really? Is it fundamental to the universe? Or is it an emergent property of more basic physical processes? Different answers lead to different conclusions about time travel. These philosophical questions might seem abstract, but they matter for practical reasons too. If you're going to build a time machine, you probably want to know whether you'll have free will once you arrive in the past, or whether you'll be stuck acting out a predetermined script like an actor who's forgotten their lines. Where is time travel research headed? Several areas show particular promise. Researchers are exploring how quantum information behaves in the presence of closed time-like curves. This work might reveal new physical principles that govern time travel at the quantum level. Scientists use analog models, systems that behave like time travel scenarios, to study temporal mechanics. For example, certain configurations of optical fibers can simulate the behavior of light traveling through a wormhole. Advanced computer simulations allow physicists to model complex space-time geometries and study their properties without actually creating them. These simulations help us understand what might happen inside a time machine. Progress in understanding quantum gravity, the nature of space-time at the smallest scales, and the fundamental structure of the universe might reveal new possibilities for time travel or definitively rule it out. Even if time machines remain impossible, research into temporal mechanics has practical applications. Understanding time dilation is crucial for GPS, telecommunications, and other technologies that require precise time coordination. Time travel scenarios provide extreme tests of our physical theories, helping us understand the limits and validity of our current models. Some quantum computing schemes rely on unusual relationships between cause and effect that are similar to time travel paradoxes. Understanding time helps us comprehend the evolution and structure of the universe, from the Big Bang to the ultimate fate of the cosmos. After exploring the physics, mathematics, and philosophy of time travel, what can we conclude? Forward time travel is not only possible but unavoidable. We're all traveling into the future at a rate of 1 second per second. We can slow down our personal clocks relative to the rest of the universe through velocity or gravitational time dilation, effectively traveling into the future faster than those around us. Backward time travel is much more problematic. While some solutions to Einstein's equations permit it, they all require exotic conditions or materials that may not exist in nature. Even if backward time travel is possible, it may be limited by quantum effects or other physical principles we don't yet understand. The universe seems to have a strong preference for causality, events happening in the proper order with causes preceding effects. It's almost as if the universe has taken a basic physics course and actually paid attention during the lectures on cause and effect. The scientific consensus is that while we can't definitively rule out time travel, any practical time machine would require technologies far beyond our current capabilities. We're more likely to understand the complete workings of consciousness, develop room temperature superconductors, and solve the mystery of dark matter before we build our first time machine. Time travel captures our imagination because it represents the ultimate mastery over our circumstances. Who hasn't wished they could undo a mistake, witness a historical event, or see how their choices play out? Time travel offers the promise of second chances and unlimited possibilities. But perhaps the real lesson from studying time travel physics isn't about building machines to change the past or see the future. Instead, it's about understanding the profound strangeness of the universe we inhabit. Einstein's theories revealed that space and time aren't the fixed stage upon which physics plays out. They're dynamic participants in the cosmic drama, capable of being stretched, warped, and possibly even looped back upon themselves. The fact that we can even ask these questions, that conscious beings made of star stuff can contemplate the nature of time itself, is perhaps more remarkable than any time machine we might imagine. Time travel research pushes us to question our most basic assumptions about reality. It forces us to confront the relationship between mathematics and physics, between possibility and actuality, between what we can imagine and what nature allows. Whether or not time machines are ever built, the journey to understand time has already taught us profound truths about the universe. We've learned that time is not universal but personal, not absolute but relative, not separate from space but woven together with it into the fabric of reality itself. And perhaps that's the most important lesson of all, that the universe is far stranger, more wonderful, and more mysterious than our everyday experience suggests. Every time you look at your watch, remember that you're glimpsing one of the deepest mysteries in physics, the nature of time itself. So, the next time you're running late to class, just remember, from the universe's perspective, the concept of late is highly relative. Unfortunately, from your professor's perspective, it's still grounds for marking you absent. And remember, whether you travel forward or backward through time, your assignments are still due when I originally scheduled them. The laws of physics may be flexible, but my grading policies are absolute. And in case you've enjoyed our evening talk so much and still might be awake, here is another educational video for you. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to The Droning Professor. Tonight's lesson is about stranded and rusting cruise ships. So, as you make yourselves comfortable, please take a moment to let us know where you're listening from, and feel free to subscribe. Now, as always, take a moment for some deep breaths, letting your mind and body relax for a good night of sleep. Tonight we're embarking on a journey, though perhaps not the kind your travel agent would recommend. We're going to explore the fascinating, melancholy, and sometimes absurd world of cruise ships that have met their end not with a dramatic sinking worthy of Hollywood, but with the slow, inexorable march of rust, abandonment, and bureaucratic neglect. Now, before you start checking your phones for better entertainment options, let me assure you that this topic has everything: corporate intrigue, environmental disasters, engineering marvels turned into maritime ghosts, and the occasional story of passengers who found themselves on what I like to call the cruise that wouldn't end, and not in a good way. The cruise industry, valued at approximately $150 billion globally, has given us floating cities that can house 9,000 people, complete with rock-climbing walls, ice skating rinks, and enough buffet food to feed a small nation. But what happens when these marvels of modern engineering reach the end of their profitable lives? The answer, unfortunately, is often as unglamorous as it is environmentally problematic. Unlike the Titanic, which at least had the decency to sink dramatically and become a cultural phenomenon, many cruise ships face a fate far less dignified. They become floating relics, rusting monuments to corporate miscalculation, environmental regulation, and the simple economics of maritime operations. The reasons cruise ships end up abandoned are as varied as the cocktails served in their former lounges. Let's examine the primary factors. The cruise industry operates on razor-thin margins despite the luxury facade. When fuel costs rise, passenger demand drops, or newer, more efficient ships enter the market, older vessels quickly become financial burdens. As we saw in 2024 when American Queen Steamboat Company ceased operations due to lack of operational capital, leading to the scrapping of several paddle-wheelers. A cruise ship typically has a profitable lifespan of 25 to 30 years. After this period, the cost of mandatory safety upgrades, hull maintenance, and compliance with ever-tightening environmental regulations often exceeds the revenue potential. It's rather like trying to keep a 1990s computer running Windows 95 competitive in today's tech market. Theoretically possible, but economically absurd. The International Maritime Organization regularly updates safety and environmental standards. Ships that don't meet new requirements face expensive retrofits or operational restrictions. The 2020 sulfur regulations, for instance, forced many older ships to install expensive scrubber systems or switch to cleaner, more costly fuel. When cruise lines face financial difficulties, their vessels often become pawns in complex legal proceedings. Ships may be seized by creditors, sold to pay debts, or simply abandoned when companies declare bankruptcy. The vessels then enter a maritime limbo, too expensive to operate but too valuable to simply scrap immediately. Some ships become stranded due to insurance disputes, legal battles over ownership, or regulatory violations that prevent them from sailing. These floating legal cases can remain in ports for years while lawyers argue over their fate. The transformation from luxury liner to rusting hulk follows a predictable pattern. The ship is withdrawn from active service. Valuable items are stripped: artwork, furniture, electronics, and anything with resale value. The crew is dismissed, and the ship is moved to a lay-up berth. Without regular maintenance, maritime vessels deteriorate rapidly. Salt air is incredibly corrosive, and ships are designed to be constantly maintained. Systems that aren't used regularly fail, and without climate control, moisture accelerates decay. Fuel, hydraulic fluids, and other chemicals begin to leak. Marine growth attaches to the hull. The ship becomes both an eyesore and an environmental threat. Eventually, the cost of bringing the vessel back to operational condition exceeds its potential value. At this point, scrapping becomes the only economically viable option if anyone is willing to pay for it. Perhaps no ship better exemplifies the tragedy of maritime abandonment than the SS United States. The vessel has been rusting away in Philadelphia since 1996, despite being full of records and firsts. Built in 1952, she was the fastest passenger liner ever constructed, capable of crossing the Atlantic in just over 3 days, a record that stands to this day. The Big U, as she was affectionately known, was a marvel of American engineering and a symbol of post-war optimism. Designed with military considerations in mind, she could be converted to carry 15,000 troops. The ship was constructed with minimal use of flammable materials. Legend has it that even the grand piano was made of aluminum, but by 1969, the jet age had made transatlantic passenger service obsolete, and the United States was withdrawn from service. Various attempts at revival followed conversion to a cruise ship, a floating hotel, even a floating university, but none came to fruition. After decades in a Philadelphia shipyard, the last great American ocean liner may be destined for the seafloor. The SS United States Conservancy has fought tirelessly to preserve the vessel, but with maintenance costs running into millions annually and no viable commercial use, the ship's future remains uncertain. The irony is palpable. A ship built to embody American supremacy on the seas now serves as a rust-stained metaphor for industrial decline. She sits in Philadelphia, visible from Interstate 95, a 990-foot-long reminder that even the mightiest ships are subject to the harsh realities of economics and time. The Costa Concordia disaster of January 13, 2012, represents a different category of stranded vessel, one created by human error rather than economic forces. The ship's captain, Francesco Schettino, was tried and found guilty of manslaughter, causing a maritime accident, and abandoning his ship, receiving a 16-year prison sentence. The 115,000-ton cruise ship, carrying over 4,200 passengers and crew, struck rocks off the Italian island of Giglio after Captain Schettino deviated from the planned route to perform a sail-by salute. The ship partially sank on its side, creating one of the most photographed shipwrecks in modern history. For over 2 years, the Concordia lay on her side like a beached whale, becoming a rusting relic of the tragedy that claimed 33 lives. The wreck became a macabre tourist attraction, visible from the shore and endlessly photographed by visitors to Giglio. The wreck removal project was a unique technical engineering operation, involving 500 technicians and 30 vessels for over 2 years, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, ending on July 27, 2014 with the ship's arrival in Genoa for dismantling. The Concordia's story is particularly tragic because it was entirely preventable. Here was a modern ship with advanced safety systems, brought low by a captain's poor judgment and subsequent cowardice. The image of the massive vessel on its side became a symbol of human fallibility and the consequences of maritime negligence. The story of the American Star, originally SS America, reads like a maritime picaresque novel. Built in 1940 as one of the largest and most luxurious American passenger liners, she served as a troopship during World War II, carrying over 350,000 military personnel, more than any other vessel in American service. After the war, she resumed passenger service, but faced the same challenges as other Atlantic liners: declining demand due to jet aircraft. She was sold to Greek interests and renamed Australis, serving the Australia emigrant route until 1978. The ship then began a nomadic existence, changing names and owners multiple times: Italis, Noga, Alfredos, and finally American Star. In 1994, while being towed to Thailand for conversion to a floating hotel, the tow line broke during a storm near the Canary Islands. The ship ran aground on the coast of Fuerteventura, where she remains today. Over the years, Atlantic storms have gradually broken the American Star apart. The ship has become a favorite subject for photographers and urban explorers, though accessing the wreck is dangerous and often illegal. What was once a symbol of American maritime pride now serves as a dramatic example of how the sea eventually claims all vessels. The American Star's story illustrates the often forgotten fact that ships, unlike buildings, cannot simply be abandoned. The sea is an active force that will eventually destroy any vessel left in its care, creating environmental hazards and navigational obstacles in the process. When we see images of rusting cruise ships, it's easy to view them as mere curiosities or symbols of waste. However, the economic implications of maritime abandonment are substantial and far-reaching. Port fees for berth space can reach $10,000 to $50,000 per month for large vessels. Security costs to prevent vandalism and unauthorized access. Basic maintenance to prevent catastrophic failure. Insurance premiums for abandoned vessels. Legal fees for ownership disputes, and regulatory compliance. Modern environmental regulations make ship owners responsible for pollution caused by their vessels, even when abandoned. Fuel oil, hydraulic fluids, and other chemicals can leak into harbors, creating expensive cleanup obligations. In some cases, governments have had to step in to prevent environmental disasters, passing costs to taxpayers. Abandoned ships occupy valuable port space that could be used for active commercial vessels. Major ports charge premium rates for berths, but abandoned ships often fall behind on payments while legal battles drag on. Ship scrapping, also known as shipbreaking, is a complex international business concentrated primarily in Bangladesh, India, Pakistan, and Turkey. While scrapping provides valuable recycled steel and other materials, the process is often environmentally problematic and dangerous for workers. For cruise ships, scrapping presents unique challenges. Modern cruise ships are among the largest moving objects ever created by humans. The Symphony of the Seas, for example, is 362 meters long and weighs 228,000 gross tons. Breaking apart such massive, complex structures requires specialized facilities. Cruise ships contain substantial amounts of asbestos insulation, PCB-contaminated electrical equipment, and other hazardous materials that require careful handling during scrapping. Getting a dead ship from its abandonment location to a scrapping facility can cost millions of dollars, especially if the vessel cannot move under its own power. The value of scrap steel fluctuates with global commodity markets. When steel prices are low, the economics of scrapping become marginal, encouraging abandonment. While not exclusively cruise ships, the Suisun Bay Reserve Fleet in California represents one of the world's largest collections of abandoned vessels. Established during World War II as a mothball fleet for military vessels, it has become a repository for ships awaiting an uncertain fate. The fleet has included various passenger vessels over the years, creating an eerie maritime graveyard visible from nearby highways. Ships sit in neat rows, their superstructures rising from the water like the skeletons of metallic whales. The sight is both impressive and melancholy, a testament to maritime ambition and its inevitable decline. Some abandoned cruise ships drift in international waters, literally ships without a country. These vessels, often flagged in countries that provide minimal oversight, can become floating environmental hazards. Without a responsible nation to enforce regulations, they may leak pollutants or become navigational hazards. The legal complexities of international maritime law mean that these ghost ships can remain in limbo for years. As recent reports indicate, several cruise ships are currently in limbo after being sold to other companies and promptly forgotten about, raising questions about whether they will ever sail again. The COVID-19 pandemic created an unprecedented situation in the cruise industry. With international travel restrictions and health concerns, the entire global cruise fleet was essentially grounded for months. Many ships sat empty in harbors worldwide, creating temporary ghost fleets. While most major cruise lines survived and resumed operations, several smaller operators went bankrupt, leaving their ships in various states of abandonment. The American Duchess was laid up in 2023 due to falling passenger traffic and struggling company fortunes, eventually being sold at auction and sent for scrapping. The pandemic revealed the industry's fundamental vulnerability. Cruise ships are only valuable when they're moving and full of paying passengers. When that stops, they quickly transform from profit centers to expensive liabilities. Abandoned cruise ships pose significant threats to marine environments. These floating cities were designed to support thousands of people, creating waste streams that require constant management. When systems fail, the environmental consequences can be severe. Fuel oil is the primary concern, but cruise ships also contain hydraulic fluids, lubricants, refrigerants, and cleaning chemicals. A single large cruise ship may contain over 3,000 tons of fuel oil. Abandoned ships become artificial reefs, but not necessarily beneficial ones. Invasive species can colonize hulls and spread to new environments when ships are moved. Loose parts, torn metal, and shifting cargo can create underwater obstacles dangerous to navigation and marine life. Abandoned cruise ships often become lightning rods for community controversy. Local residents may view them as eyesores that impact property values and tourism. Environmental groups raise concerns about pollution risks. Port authorities face pressure to remove vessels but often lack legal authority to force owners to act. The SS United States in Philadelphia exemplifies these tensions. While some view the ship as a historic artifact worthy of preservation, others see it as an expensive problem that should be removed. The debate reflects broader questions about how society should balance historical preservation with practical concerns about cost and environmental risk. The cruise ship abandonment phenomenon raises uncomfortable questions about maritime heritage. Ships like the SS United States represent significant historical and technological achievements, but preserving them requires substantial ongoing investment with uncertain returns. Unlike buildings, which can stand empty for years without major structural problems, ships deteriorate rapidly when not actively maintained. This creates a cruel paradox. The ships most worthy of preservation are often those most expensive to maintain. A recent example of cruise ship troubles emerged in 2024 when a dream round-the-world cruise left passengers stranded in Belfast, with the vessel remaining stationary despite being scheduled to leave at the end of May. This case illustrates how operational problems can quickly transform a luxury cruise into a maritime nightmare. The passengers, who had paid substantial sums for extended world cruise experiences, found themselves in limbo, not technically abandoned, but certainly stranded by circumstances beyond their control. Their situation highlights the vulnerability of passengers when cruise operations face unexpected challenges. 2024 saw significant activity in cruise ship scrapping, particularly following the collapse of American Queen Steamboat Company in February due to lack of operational capital. The company's fleet of paddle wheelers, which had provided luxury river cruising experiences, were quickly sold for scrap after the business failure. This recent example demonstrates how quickly the cruise industry can change. Ships that were operating profitably one season can find themselves on the scrap heap the next, victims of corporate financial problems or changing market conditions. Maritime authorities worldwide continue to grapple with the problem of abandoned vessels. Multiple cruise ships currently exist in limbo after being sold to companies that have subsequently forgotten about them. These modern ghost ships represent ongoing challenges for maritime regulation and environmental protection. The problem is compounded by the complex international nature of ship ownership. A vessel may be owned by a company in one country, flagged in another, and operated by a third, making it difficult to assign responsibility when problems arise. To understand why abandoned cruise ships deteriorate so rapidly, we must examine the hostile environment in which they exist. Seawater is among the most corrosive substances ships regularly encounter, containing not only salt but also dissolved oxygen and various chemicals that accelerate metal degradation. When different metals are in contact in the presence of seawater, they form galvanic cells that accelerate corrosion. Cruise ships, with their complex systems involving steel hulls, aluminum superstructures, and various metal fittings, are particularly susceptible. The constant movement of ships in seaways creates stress on metal structures. Over time, this stress combines with corrosion to create cracks and failures that can compromise structural integrity. Marine organisms contribute to ship degradation through biofouling and biocorrosion. Certain bacteria can actually accelerate metal corrosion, while larger organisms like shipworms can damage wooden components. Modern cruise ships are marvels of engineering complexity, with interconnected systems that depend on each other for proper function. When maintenance stops, these interdependencies can create cascade failures. Without regular operation, electrical connections corrode, insulation fails, and moisture infiltrates control systems. Once electrical systems fail, other dependent systems follow. Climate control systems prevent condensation and maintain proper humidity levels. When these systems fail, moisture accelerates deterioration throughout the vessel. Ships are designed to flex with wave action. When moored for extended periods without proper maintenance, this flexibility can be lost, leading to stress concentrations and structural failures. The relationship between maintenance costs and asset value creates a tipping point where abandonment becomes economically rational, even if socially and environmentally problematic. Ship maintenance costs increase exponentially as vessels age. Systems that could be maintained for thousands of dollars per year, when new may require hundreds of thousands in repairs after neglect. Simultaneously, the potential value of aged cruise ships declines due to changing passenger expectations, regulatory requirements, and fuel efficiency standards. When annual maintenance costs exceed potential annual revenue, owners face strong economic incentives to abandon vessels, even if the social costs of abandonment are higher than continued maintenance. The legal framework governing abandoned vessels is a patchwork of international treaties, national laws, and local regulations that often conflict with each other. Under international maritime law, the country where a ship is registered, the flag state, has primary responsibility for the vessel. However, flag states are often chosen for convenience rather than effective oversight. When abandoned ships are in national waters, the coastal state has authority but may lack legal mechanisms to force action by foreign owners. Traditional maritime salvage law was designed for ships in distress, not chronic abandonment. Modern situations often fall into legal gray areas. Environmental regulations have become increasingly stringent, contributing to the abandonment problem. IMO requirements for low-sulfur fuel significantly increased operating costs for older ships, pushing many toward early retirement. New requirements for ballast water treatment systems have created expensive retrofit requirements for existing vessels. Increasingly strict requirements for waste handling and disposal have made older ships less viable for cruise operations. Modern maritime law attempts to ensure that ship owners cannot simply abandon vessels without consequence, but enforcement remains problematic. Some jurisdictions require bonds or insurance to cover potential abandonment costs, but these requirements are not universal. Complex ownership structures involving multiple corporations across different countries can make it difficult to identify responsible parties. Maritime law traditionally limits owner liability, creating situations where abandonment costs exceed potential recovery from responsible parties. The cruise ship abandonment problem has sparked innovation in vessel design and life cycle management. Some new ships are being designed with modular components that can be more easily removed and recycled at end of life. Advanced materials that are more resistant to corrosion or more easily recyclable are being incorporated into new vessel designs. IoT sensors and digital monitoring systems can track vessel condition in real time, potentially preventing catastrophic deterioration during layup periods. Emerging technologies offer the possibility of reducing maintenance costs for laid-up vessels. Systems that automatically apply corrosion inhibitors or maintain protective electrical currents could extend vessel life during abandonment periods. Automated systems could monitor for leaks or environmental hazards, triggering alerts before minor problems become major disasters. Technologies that allow minimal crew operation could make it economically feasible to maintain vessels in better condition during extended layups. Innovation in ship disposal offers alternatives to traditional scrapping. Some decommissioned cruise ships have been intentionally sunk to create artificial reefs, though this requires extensive environmental preparation. Abandoned cruise ships could potentially be converted to floating hotels, apartments, or other infrastructure, though regulatory and financing challenges remain significant. Advanced recycling techniques could make it economically viable to dismantle ships in developed countries with better environmental and safety standards. Cruise ships represent more than mere transportation. They embody dreams of luxury, adventure, and escape from ordinary life. When these symbols of aspiration become rusting hulks, they carry powerful psychological and cultural weight. The transformation from floating palace to maritime relic serves as a potent metaphor for industrial decline, environmental negligence, and the ultimate futility of human ambition against natural forces. The sight of an abandoned cruise ship evokes the same melancholy as a deserted theme park or shuttered factory, physical evidence of dreams deferred and promises unfulfilled. Abandoned cruise ships have become popular subjects for photographers and urban explorers, spawning entire online communities dedicated to documenting maritime decay. These images serve multiple functions. The contrast between former luxury and current decay creates visually striking compositions that appeal to our fascination with ruins and decline. Photographers preserve images of ships and maritime infrastructure that may soon disappear entirely. Images of abandoned vessels serve as silent commentary on consumer culture, environmental responsibility, and economic inequality. For people who worked on or traveled aboard cruise ships that later became abandoned hulks, the transformation can be emotionally difficult. Former crew members describe the strange experience of seeing ships where they once lived and worked slowly deteriorating in some distant harbor. Passengers who enjoyed memorable vacations aboard vessels that later met ignominious ends report feelings of loss and nostalgia. The ships that provided settings for anniversaries, honeymoons, and family celebrations become symbols of mortality and impermanence. The aviation industry provides an interesting comparison for handling end-of-life assets. Aircraft boneyards like those in Arizona's Mojave Desert serve as temporary storage for aircraft that may be returned to service, used for parts, or eventually scrapped. Key differences from maritime abandonment. Desert storage provides ideal conditions with low humidity and minimal corrosion. Aircraft are systematically cannibalized for spare parts, maintaining economic value. Aircraft registration and ownership are generally less complex than ship ownership. Well-established procedures exist for aircraft storage, maintenance, and disposal. The automotive industry has developed sophisticated systems for end-of-life vehicle management, driven by environmental regulations and materials recovery economics. Manufacturers bear responsibility for vehicle disposal. Regulations mandate specific percentages of materials must be recovered. Networks of authorized treatment facilities ensure proper disposal. Scrappage programs provide financial incentives for proper disposal. These approaches could potentially be adapted for maritime use, though the scale and complexity of ships present additional challenges. Addressing the cruise ship abandonment problem requires coordinated international action and innovative policy approaches. A new international treaty specifically addressing vessel abandonment could establish minimum financial security requirements for ship owners, standardized procedures for identifying and addressing abandoned vessels, mechanisms for cost recovery from responsible parties, and clear authority for port states to take action. Similar to automotive and electronics industries, ship manufacturers could bear responsibility for end-of-life vessel management, design requirements to facilitate recycling, financial contributions to vessel disposal funds, and take-back programs for manufacturer-built vessels. Regional agreements could address abandonment problems more effectively than global treaties. Shared databases of at-risk vessels, coordinated enforcement actions, and joint financing for removal operations. Emerging technologies offer potential solutions to traditional abandonment problems. AI-powered systems could identify vessels at risk of abandonment based on financial, operational, and regulatory factors, enabling preventive intervention. Distributed ledger systems could create tamper-proof records of vessel ownership and financial responsibility, reducing legal complexity. Next-generation materials could reduce maintenance costs and environmental risks for laid-up vessels. Autonomous systems could perform basic maintenance tasks on abandoned vessels, preventing deterioration while reducing human costs. The cruise industry may need fundamental changes to address the abandonment problem. Business models that incorporate end-of-life costs into operational planning could reduce abandonment incentives. New insurance products could better address abandonment risks and environmental liabilities. Leasing arrangements or public-private partnerships could change incentive structures around vessel maintenance and disposal. To illustrate the complex factors that lead to cruise ship abandonment, let's examine the recent collapse of American Queen Steamboat Company in detail. American Queen Steamboat Company operated a fleet of paddle-wheel riverboats providing luxury cruises on American rivers. The company's vessels included American Queen, 2012 to 2024, American Empress, 2014 to 2024, American Duchess, 2017 to 2024, and American Countess, 2021 to 2024. These ships provided themed cruises focusing on American history and culture, with itineraries on the Mississippi, Columbia, and other major river systems. The company marketed itself as offering authentic American river experiences with modern luxury amenities. On February 20th, 2024, American Queen Steamboat Company LLC ceased operations, citing lack of operational capital. The sudden closure left passengers stranded mid-cruise and employees without jobs. Several factors contributed to the company's financial difficulties. River cruises were particularly vulnerable to pandemic restrictions, with older passengers, the primary demographic, being especially cautious about travel. Riverboat operations face unique challenges, including seasonal restrictions, specialized crew requirements, and limited itinerary flexibility. The river cruise market is relatively small, and competition from larger operators with better financial resources put pressure on independent companies. Rising operational costs squeezed profit margins in an already challenging market segment. Following the bankruptcy, American Cruise Lines acquired several vessels at auction, with the American Duchess being sent for scrapping on May 14, 2024. The rapid transition from operation to scrapping illustrates how quickly vessels can go from assets to liabilities. The scrapping decision was likely based on several factors: age and condition of the vessels, cost of bringing ships into compliance with current regulations, market demand for river cruise capacity, and availability of qualified crew for specialized riverboat operations. The American Queen case illustrates several key points about modern cruise ship abandonment. Cruise companies often operate with high fixed costs and leverage, making them vulnerable to revenue disruptions. Ships designed for specific markets or routes may have limited alternative uses, reducing their residual value. The speed with which the American Duchess went from operation to scrapping shows how quickly maritime assets can lose value. The acquisition of bankrupt competitors by larger players suggests ongoing industry consolidation. As we reach the end of our journey through the graveyard of maritime dreams, what conclusions can we draw about the phenomenon of abandoned cruise ships? First, we must recognize that ship abandonment is not merely a technical or economic problem. It's a reflection of broader issues in how we design industrial systems, allocate environmental responsibility, and manage end-of-life transitions for complex assets. The cruise industry's abandonment problem stems from fundamental misalignment between private incentives and social costs. When maintenance becomes expensive and revenue prospects dim, individual ship owners face rational incentives to abandon vessels, even when the broader social costs of abandonment exceed the costs of proper disposal. Second, the international nature of maritime commerce creates regulatory gaps that allow abandonment problems to persist. Ships can be flagged in one country, owned by entities in another, and abandoned in a third, making it difficult to assign clear responsibility for cleanup and disposal. Third, technological solutions exist but require coordinated implementation and appropriate economic incentives. Advanced materials, predictive maintenance, and innovative disposal methods could reduce abandonment problems, but only if regulatory frameworks create incentives for their adoption. The story of abandoned cruise ships also serves as a broader metaphor for industrial society's relationship with consumption and disposal. These floating cities, designed to provide temporary luxury experiences, ultimately become permanent environmental liabilities. They remind us that all industrial products, no matter how sophisticated or luxurious, eventually become waste that society must manage. Looking forward, addressing the cruise ship abandonment problem will require new treaties and agreements specifically addressing vessel abandonment, with clear assignment of responsibilities and enforcement mechanisms. Financial instruments and business models that internalize end-of-life costs into operational decision-making. Continued advancement in materials science, predictive maintenance, and recycling technologies to reduce both abandonment incentives and environmental impacts. Recognition that the true cost of maritime luxury includes proper end-of-life management, and that consumers and regulators must demand accountability for these costs. The rusting hulks scattered across the world's harbors and coasts serve as monuments to human ambition and technological achievement, but also as warnings about the importance of considering full life cycle impacts in industrial design. As we continue to build ever larger and more complex vessels, we must also develop the institutional and technological frameworks necessary to manage them responsibly throughout their entire existence. Perhaps most importantly, the story of abandoned cruise ships reminds us that the sea, which has inspired humanity's greatest adventures and technological achievements, will ultimately reclaim all vessels entrusted to its care. The question is whether we will manage this inevitable transition responsibly, or whether we will continue to leave rusting monuments to our short-sightedness scattered across the maritime landscape. In closing, let me leave you with this thought. Every time you see a gleaming new cruise ship setting out on its maiden voyage, remember that somewhere in the world, another vessel that once carried similar hopes and dreams is slowly surrendering to rust and time. The challenge for our generation is to break this cycle and create maritime industries that are truly sustainable, from bow to stern, from launch to scrapyard. The sea remembers all ships, but we have the power to ensure that memory is one of responsibility rather than abandonment. And in case you've enjoyed our evening talk so much and still might be awake, here is another educational video for you.